If there's one thing that I learned from watching Limbo, it's that I never want to be caught in a snowstorm on a Scottish island. That looks brutal. What's going on, you guys? James here with another real review, and today we're diving into a smaller film that you might not have heard of. It's called Limbo, and it's being distributed by Focus Features, so thank you so much to the team over there for giving me a screener for review. It releases in theaters on April 30th, and it's directed by Sharrock and starring Amir El-Masry, Vikash, Bhai, and Kenneth. Now, before I get into what worked in this movie and what unfortunately didn't work in this film, if it's your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where I talk about movies all the time like this, and we do get them early. So if you don't want to miss out, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, and tap on that bell so you'll be the first one in the comments. Smash that thumbs up button if you're a fan of reviews like this, and get loud in the comments below if you've seen the movie, guys, and let me know, did you like it, did you not? And trust me, we got a lot more content this week to talk about because, man, Netflix, I don't even want to get started. Let's get into what Limbo was actually about in case you're unfamiliar. Omar is a Syrian refugee seeking asylum on a Scottish island. As we learn more about his past and how he was a promising musician, we start to experience life in Omar's shoes and find out whether he will wait for asylum or go back home. Now, it's the idea for this movie that drew me in. I didn't see any trailers, I saw one poster, but I thought, you know what, this seems like a film that is going to allow me to escape, and it is going to be a slice of life type of film, so I was expecting to get emotional. I'll tell you if that happened later, but guys, let's get into the first thing that works in this movie, and what jumps off the page almost immediately is the vast landscape shots. It was just so beautiful, and I love the way that even though it was shot in 4:3, you could still get a sense of that entire scale on this Scottish island. Cinematographer Nick Cook really does a good job at establishing shots, and he just lingers and lets you understand where they're at, the landscape, the season, whether it be a colder climate, a warmer climate. It's so beautiful to just really sit down and escape in these shots that he captures. And I also love the way that the film plays with colors. Even though it's a very dreary film in tone, I do love that there were some colors that popped off the screen and really just stuck with me. And even though the film does spend a lot of time with still shots capturing our characters in silence, I love the sound design and how the natural sound was used in lieu of a score sometimes. A lot of people said that they love the score, but for me, that's not the one thing that stuck in my mind. It really was all the natural sounds as it's silent and you're just observing these characters in that moment of time. It was so beautiful, and I'm really glad that the sound design was nailed here, and it probably wasn't too hard shooting on location. The sounds of the chickens, and speaking of chickens, man, one of our main characters loves chickens, so you'll hear a lot of that in the film. But Limbo really is a technically beautiful film, and I did catch myself enjoying the moments where the camera simply didn't move and we fixated on our leads acting with just their eyes. It does add a little bit more layer and depth to those emotional moments. There were a couple here that really stuck out to me, and I can't reveal them because it is a little spoilery, but I will say that there are some moments here that are powerful and felt thanks to the silence in the movie. Now, when it comes to the acting, guys, the one actor that stole the show for me was Vikash, who plays Omar's friend Farhad. Omar and Farhad have this uncanny friendship that they wouldn't otherwise have if it wasn't for them seeking refuge and also living together, being flatmates. But it's so cool just to see them interact, and it is Farhad that actually grounds this movie because, putting all the jokes aside, he's the only one to get through to Omar. And there were stretches where the movie was simply doing nothing, and then Vikash jumps on the scene, and all of a sudden the film picks up a bit of momentum. No disrespect to Amir El-Masry, but I do think that if this film actually centered around Farhad, it might have been a more interesting film. I'm not saying that Amir El-Masry gave a bad performance, but what I'm saying is that the character of Omar was not nearly as layered, I would say, as Farhad. I think Farhad brought more to the table. So we have some consistent writing for Farhad, some beautiful shots. I love the technical aspects of this film, but guys, I can't lie to you, Limbo did not work for me. Now, I really wanted to like this film. Like I said, the idea for this film jumped off the page to me, and I wanted to sit down and enjoy it and eventually love it, hopefully. But I came away thinking that, man, this movie was a misfire. The film really just never clicked for me, and coming in at just under an hour and 45 minutes, I only felt locked into about 10 or 15 minutes of the film. I know I mentioned it earlier, but there's this dry, dreary tone to the movie, and that's okay, honestly, especially if it serves the plot well. But there are stretches of time where, again, nothing is happening, and not only that, it took me right out of the film. And I do understand that this movie is trying to give you that experience of how it is to live life as a refugee, but there was really never clear direction. Was it supposed to be a dark comedy? Was it supposed to be a more serious drama? Eventually I thought, okay, it's a drama, but then there would be sprinkles of jokes and some weird moments that were jarring and completely clashing tonally. And the movie actually opens up on a really odd note that that was one of the weaker moments of the film. It's an extended scene in a cultural awareness class where the refugees just try to learn from these two teachers. It's awkward and it lingers and lingers, and eventually it tries to intertwine comedy, but then it gives you heavy subject matter. And I thought to myself, okay, listen, where are we going with this film? And by the end, I kind of had an idea, but honestly, none of the emotional moments worked because I was just trying to figure out where this film was headed. And while I can appreciate a 4:3 aspect ratio, clearly I'm a fan of A24 films, I don't think it added anything to the experience. Sometimes 4:3 aspect ratios can really add to the mood of a film. It can make you feel confined. It can really just give the movie a very unique experience. But here, when you have these beautiful landscape shots, when cinematographer Nick Cook is trying to give you an entire establishing shot and it's cut off on the sides, I feel like this was screaming for a widescreen experience. And honestly, the 4:3 aspect ratio never really added anything to me. It just let me know that it's an indie film, but I mean, we kind of knew that. And the biggest flaw in this movie is really the lack of character development. We get thrown into the life of Omar and learn of his situation thanks to these phone calls with his mother and his father, but I never resonated with those more intimate personal moments because they didn't do much to build the character of Omar himself. They were just telling us this is what he's going through, this is what he's been through, and this is, how his family is, this is how his life is now. They didn't do a lot of show don't tell, and there's enough fat here in this movie they could have trimmed off and made room for those moments for us to actually see Omar and what he's been through. Instead, they tell us, but it doesn't really work for me. And then by the end, guys, I have to say the third act of this film just drags its feet across the finish line. There's really just not enough staying power in this movie, and the story doesn't do enough for me to really get invested 100%, and it's a shame because I do think that Amir El-Masry has the chops as an actor. He's just given a script that I don't think serves him very well, but it serves everyone around him very well, even his flatmates, Farhad, you have Abidi, Wasef, they have some depth to them, and Omar, man, they just do a lot of that whole tell don't show type of writing, and not a fan of it, guys. So overall, you guys, Limbo is a film that has a very compelling premise, but the execution is so flawed. I really wanted to enjoy this movie in a different way. I came in expecting a different experience, and on paper we get that. But when you see it on the big screen, well, the little screen for me, it doesn't really work, and I think it's mainly due to the lack of character development. The direction was a little too confusing, and none of the more emotional moments resonated with me, especially towards the second half of the film, because I never really got to understand Omar and see what he went through. It's not enough just to tell your audience. I think they should have done a lot more of showing their audience. And while I will never pretend to understand how tough it is to live life as a refugee, I do think this film tries its hardest. However, it adds in those comedic moments in times where I felt like maybe it needed to be more serious. So again, the tones were clashing, and this movie didn't necessarily know where it wanted to go, and when it got there at the end, I thought, okay, that's it? So guys, if you have to ask me, do I go out and see this in theaters this weekend? I would say only give it a shot if you are knowing what you're going into. This is an indie film through and through. This is definitely a film that's going to maybe not be the most interesting at times, and boy, you got to make sure you are wide awake for this, because if not, the silence will put you fast asleep. But what I will say is that Limbo was a film that has a strong premise. Again, it doesn't have the execution, so I would say you can wait for it on PVOD. But again, if you're committed to a story like this and you like the actors, go ahead and support it this weekend in cinemas. So there you have it, guys. That's my review of Limbo, a film again that I wish I loved. I just couldn't get there on this one. But if you enjoyed this review, guys, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, and tap on that bell so you'll be the first one for the next video, because this week we got Invincible, we got reviews from Netflix, we got oh my gosh, Without Remorse, Michael B. Jordan, let's go baby, and hey, a lot more surprises, I'm sure. News doesn't stop, guys, so that means I don't stop either. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys at the next screening.